There's a town in these mountains with 2 mines in it. A critical step in making almost everything you've ever typed on, watched, or driven pass through one of them first. Not the silicon. The bucket the silicon gets melted in. There's a rock here you can park beside on a Tuesday afternoon. It's 1,800,000,000 years old. Rain that lands a few hundred yards apart on one hillside comes out in 2 different oceans. A constable was beaten to death in 1804 over a border that turned out to be wrong by 20 miles. And in September of 2024, 30.78 inches of rain came down on this range in 3 days and put 2,217 hillsides into the valleys below. You can't see any of it from the overlook. 22. Start with the water. Helene came ashore in Florida on the 26th of September, 2024. By the time it reached western North Carolina, it wasn't supposed to be the story anymore. The rain gauge at Busick logged 30.78 inches over 3 days. Mount Mitchell took 24.41. Spruce Pine took 24.12. The French Broad River runs right through the middle of Asheville. Major flood stage, there is 18 feet. It crested at 24.82. That broke a record that had stood since 1916. Downstream, the Swannanoa at Biltmore came up to 26.1 feet, more than 5 feet over its 1916 maximum. 250 people died in the United States. 107 of them were in North Carolina. In 3 days, 21. Now go the other direction. Down. Along a stretch of the Blue Ridge Parkway near milepost 418 and out toward Rowan Mountain, there's an outcrop of something called the Mars Hill Terrane. The rock in it crystallized around 1,800,000,000 years ago. That's not the age of the mountains. They're much younger than the rock they're made of. What you're looking at is material that was already ancient when the first Appalachian collision started shoving it upward. Hold on to that number. It comes back at number 2, and when it does, it explains why a large share of the planet's electronics depends on 3 counties in North Carolina. 20. The Eastern Continental Divide runs along the crest of this range, and near Blowing Rock you can stand on it. A spring on one side feeds the South Fork of the New River. A few hundred yards away, the Yadkin starts. The Yadkin runs 435 miles to Winyah Bay and the Atlantic. The New goes the other way, into the Kanawha, into the Ohio, into the Mississippi, and out below New Orleans, about 2,100 miles later. Same storm, same hillside, 1,700 miles difference in how far the water has to go. 10 miles from that spring is Grandfather Mountain, 5,946 feet. The divide runs straight over the top of it, north face to the Gulf, east face down, Wilson Creek, to the Atlantic. Remember that mountain. 19. They're called the Blue Ridge because they look blue. Everybody knows that part. Almost nobody has the mechanism right. The trees release a compound called isoprene. Isoprene itself is a colorless gas. What happens is that it oxidizes in the atmosphere and builds microscopic particles, and those particles scatter short wavelength light back at you. So the blue isn't a gas, it's particles built by chemistry in the air above the trees. And here's the part that should bother you. Most of the haze out there on a summer afternoon isn't the forest at all. The Park Service puts the natural visibility in this range at about 110 miles. The current average is around 60. That extra murk is sulfate from burning fossil fuel, and it reads whitish, not blue. Half of what the range is named for has been replaced by something else. 18. Underneath all that, the ground is crawling. Literally. Great Smoky Mountains. National Park has about 30 species of salamander living in it. 24 of them have no lungs at all. They breathe through their skin and the lining of their mouths, which is why they depend so completely on the damp these mountains hold. The Park Service says salamanders outnumber every mammal in the park put together. There's a red-cheeked salamander up there that exists nowhere else on Earth. 17. In 1803, Georgia decided part of this range belonged to it. Georgia organized it as Walton County. About 800 people were living in it, and most of them genuinely did not know which state they were in. It turned violent. A constable named John Havner was struck over the left eye with a rifle butt and died on the 15th of December, 1804. Buncombe County sent 72 militiamen up to arrest 10 Walton officials, so they settled it the only way left. On the 15th of June, 1807, Joseph Caldwell from the university and Joseph Meigs from Georgia set up instruments at the Buncombe County Courthouse and took a reading on the stars. Their very first measurement came back 20 miles north of the 35th parallel. Georgia had been wrong the entire time, 16. Linville Gorge runs 12 miles, and the rim sits as much as 2,000 feet above the river. No gorge in the east drops that far in that little distance. Inside it, roughly 10,000 acres has never been logged. About 5% of the gorge got cut up in the northeast corner. The rest was too steep to be worth the trouble. Nobody protected it. The terrain beat the loggers. A vegetation survey published in 1998 called it one of only 3 large tracts of old-growth forest left in the southern Appalachians. 15. Grandfather Mountain has its own weather station, and on the 25th of February, 2019, just before midnight, it recorded a gust of 124 miles an hour. In that same storm, the mountain logged 16 consecutive hours of gusts over 100. And when the wind stops, the summits go white without a flake of snow falling. It's rime ice. Fog droplets stay liquid down toward 40 below in the right conditions, and the instant they hit anything colder than freezing, they lock solid. It builds into the wind sideways in feathers off the trees, and the signs, and the railings. People film it every winter, and caption it, snow. It isn't. 14. There was a town up in Poplar Gorge called Lost Cove. It sat right on the Tennessee line, which is exactly why it existed. A still on a border is hard to prosecute. At its peak, it had around 100 people, 13 or 14 houses, 2 sawmills, a church and a cemetery. It never had a road, not once. The residents asked the legislature for one and were told no, so they lived off the railroad, and when the railroad stopped serving them, that was the end of it. The last family walked out in 1957. Nobody evicted them. The place just became impossible to reach and they left. Fires took most of the buildings in 2007. What's up there now is the cemetery, 3 houses, and Swin Miller's Chevrolet, rusting in a ditch where he left it. 13. Above Linville Falls, there's a ridge called Brown Mountain. For a century, people have driven up there to watch lights move across it. Here's the part that gets left out. In 1913, the Geological Survey sent a man named Sterrett to look. He found the headlights of westbound Southern Railway locomotives lined up with the schedule. In 1922, George Mansfield went back with a map and a telescope and published the breakdown. 47% car headlights, 33% locomotives, 10% stationary lights, 10% brush fires. Appalachian State has had low-light cameras on that mountain for years. By 2014, 6,300 viewing hours and nothing on them that couldn't be explained. And the backstory is worse than the lights. The famous account from 1771 describes something in South Carolina and was only attached to Brown Mountain in 1927. The Cherokee legend everybody repeats first appears in 1938 with no source, written by people who weren't Cherokee. The mystery is real. It just isn't old. Somebody built it. I'll say this out loud because it's the one thing here I can't settle. In 2016, those same cameras caught a ball of light that the team could not account for. Make of it what you want. 12. Virginia spent 10 years assembling 176,000 acres of this range to hand to the federal government. Some of it was bought, the rest was taken under a blanket condemnation law the state wrote for the purpose in 1927. 465 families were still living up there the day the deeds changed hands. Count the ones already pushed out, and the Park Service says 500 or more. Most of them left on their own. A few had to be carried. On the 3rd of October 1935, it took 4 deputies to handcuff a man named Melanchthon Kleiser and wrestle him into a sheriff's car at his own gas pumps while he shouted the Constitution at them. And once a family was gone, the Civilian Conservation Corps had orders to remove all evidence that anyone had ever lived there. Houses came down for lumber. Some were burned, so nobody could move back in. People watched the smoke from the road. There was a book published in 1933 called Hollow Folk. It described those hollows as unlettered, primitive, cut off from the world. They weren't cut off. Dig those sites now, and you get phonographs, car parts, patent medicine bottles, furniture ordered from the Sears catalogue. 42 of the oldest were granted life estates, permission signed in Washington to stay in their own houses until they died. Park employees looked in on the last of them, a woman named Annie Lee Bradley Schenck, from 1950 onward. She died in 1979, at 92. 43 years after Roosevelt dedicated the place, somebody still had the right to live inside it. 11. Mount Mitchell is 6,684 feet, which makes it the highest point in the United States east of the Mississippi. It also holds North Carolina's cold record, 34 below, on the 21st of January, 1985. Below it sits Asheville's water supply, and the city owns the mountainside it comes off. 22,500 acres of forest with nobody living on it, and a reservoir holding 5.8 billion gallons. Protected doesn't mean safe. Helene churned that reservoir into mud and left 125,000 people without drinkable water for weeks. Tell me in the comments which of these you'd already heard. Now we go under it. Everything left is about the rock and what's inside the rock and what people have done to get at it. It gets more expensive as we go. 10. These mountains are older than the Atlantic Ocean. That's not a figure of speech. The last collision that built them finished around 260 million years ago. The volcanic event that split Pangaea and opened the Atlantic came roughly 60 million years after that. The ocean is newer, and they're wearing down measurably. Cosmogenic dating puts the erosion rate on the escarpment at about 22 meters per million years. Work that into something you can picture, and it's roughly 1 inch every 1,840 years, which sounds like a range quietly dying. It isn't. Take weight off the top of a continent, and the crust underneath rides up to compensate. Rock keeps arriving from below at close to the rate it's stripped off above, and the surface holds its height. These mountains have been running that trade for 200 million years. 9. On the highest ground, above about 4,500 feet, there's a forest that doesn't belong to this latitude at all. Red spruce and Fraser fir, left behind when the ice retreated. In 1908, an insect called the balsam woolly adelgid arrived in New England. It reached Mount Mitchell in 1957. It has since killed at least 80% of the mature Fraser firs on that summit. The trees come back. That's the part people miss. Young firs grow up underneath the grey snags of their parents, reach maturity, and get attacked all over again. It isn't an extinction, it's a loop, and you can watch it running from the parking lot. 8. Something else lives in that forest. The spruce fir moss spider is about the size of the rubber on the end of a pencil. Its entire known range on this planet is fewer than 25 mountaintops, all of them in these mountains, on Grandfather Mountain and Roan Mountain and the Black Mountains and the Smokies. It needs moss mats on rock at one specific dampness. When the adelgid kills the firs, the canopy opens, sunlight gets in, the moss dries out, and the spider has nowhere to be. An insect from Europe, a tree, a moss, a spider. Pull one. The rest follow. 7. Ashe County had a copper mine called Ore Knob. It ran on and off from 1855 and shut down in 1962. Over its life, it produced 1,500,000 tons of ore. Out of that came 31,000 tons of copper, 9,400 ounces of gold, and 145,000 ounces of silver. It also left about 22 acres of tailings behind. Those stayed. Wells in the surrounding hollows tested over the health limits for manganese and cobalt. The site went onto the National Priorities List in 2009. A mine that stopped producing before the moon landing was still poisoning drinking water 50 years later. 6. Mortimer, North Carolina had about 800 people in it. A company town founded in 1904 around a sawmill. In 1916, a fire burned from Grandfather Mountain down to Wilson Creek, and the flood arrived directly behind it. The town emptied inside a year. Then the Civilian Conservation Corps came through in the Depression and rebuilt most of what the water had taken, and in 1940 the flood came back and finished it. That's why the ruins up there are from 2 different decades. Sawmill machinery from one town, coarse stonework from another, same clearing, you can walk to it. 5. On the 16th of September 2004, about 11 inches of rain from Hurricane Ivan came off Fishhawk Mountain in Macon County as a debris flow. It happened at night, modeled top speed 33 miles an hour. It destroyed 15 houses and pushed one of them almost 200 feet down the valley. 5 people died at Peaks Creek, and it was over in under a minute. That's why the state started mapping this hazard. North Carolina's landslide inventory now holds more than 4,500 of them. So when Helene put 2,217 new slides on the map in a single week and 13 people died in one debris flow above Fairview, none of it was a surprise. 4. Go back to the Fraser fir, the dying one. North Carolina grows 5 to 6 million of them a year on more than 30,000 acres across about 1,500 farms. Wholesale value $100 million, retail $250 million. Each tree takes over 10 years to reach harvest and gets handled at least 100 times on the way. So the same species that's listed as vulnerable in the wild that an insect has been eating alive on Mount Mitchell since 1957 stands in millions of American living rooms every December. Abundance on a farm is not recovery in a forest. 3. There's a quieter industry underneath the Christmas trees. North Carolina leads the United States in feldspar. National production was 450,000 tons in 2024 at $110 a ton, and 4 of the 8 American mines are here. Feldspar was first pulled out of the ground at Spruce Pine in 1911. The state also supplies about 60% of American scrap mica, and it comes out as a byproduct of the feldspar. It sells for $130 a ton. Feldspar moves far more tonnage than anything else in that district. It pays the bills. It has never once made a headline. The thing that does make headlines comes out of the same holes in the ground. 2. Around 380 million years ago, in the middle collision of the 3 that built this range, molten rock forced its way up into the crust here and cooled slowly underground. Slow cooling grows big crystals. That's a pegmatite. And the pegmatites that formed under Mitchell, Avery, and Yancey counties came out unusually, almost absurdly clean. Remember the rock from number 21, the one that was already 1.5 billion years old before any of this started? That basement is what these pegmatites intruded into, and the chemistry of that particular basement is a large part of why the quartz in them is what it is, an accident of the deep past. Nobody knew for 380 million years. 1. There's a district in these mountains, about 25 miles long and 5 miles wide. 2 companies mine it, Sibelco and the Quartz Corp. Bloomberg's energy analysts put the number at more than 80% of the ultra-pure quartz sand that goes into crucibles for the solar and semiconductor industries. About 20,000 tons a year out of one district. The version you've probably heard is a different sentence. Not most of the world's quartz, most of the world's crucible sand. The quartz does not become your chip. The silicon in a chip comes from ordinary quartzite mined in a dozen countries. What Spruce Pine supplies is the crucible, the container the silicon gets melted in at over 1400 degrees before the seed crystal is drawn out of it, and the crucible partly dissolves into the melt while that's happening. That's the whole reason it has to be that pure. Anything in the wall of the bucket ends up in the crystal. One crucible pulls about 8 ingots over 400 hours, and then it's finished. 2 a month per machine. After the polysilicon itself, it's the most expensive input in the process, somewhere around 14% of what it costs to run the line. So the chain runs like this. A collision 380 million years ago pushes magma into rock that was already ancient. It cools slowly enough to grow clean crystals. 380 million years later, someone works out that this particular sand makes a better crucible than anything else being mined. And now, one step in making the silicon behind modern electronics runs through 3 counties in North Carolina, and there's no easy way around it. That's number 1. But there's a correction ode, because the version of this that went around the world in 2024 was wrong. After Helene, a lot of people were told the global chip supply was about to fail. Sibelco was down for 14 days. The Quartz Corp said in October that no disruption was expected, no production line stopped, and on the 1st of July 2026, the Quartz Corp closed one of its Spruce Pine plants indefinitely, 20 to 30 jobs. Nothing to do with the hurricane, they said, market conditions. 2 years after the world was told this town was irreplaceable, a company shut part of it down for ordinary business reasons. The mountains that fed the mills and the mountains that fed the flood. Under all of it, the sand that everything else runs on. You can't see it from the overlook. So tell me which of these 22 changes how you'll look at that ridge next time you drive it. Subscribe, and I'll keep going underneath America. This has been States Explained. Thanks for watching, and remember, the map only ever shows you the top.